I bought this little hat for my dog for a Halloween costume. It's a little witch's hat with green hair. It's actually made for a cat, but my dog has a really small head. But then I thought, well, all right, I'm going to make a cape for her myself, and I'll show you how I did it. So I got some black fabric that you can see sitting on the table. The hat's on top of it. And I cut a pattern using one of her other little coats for the length and the width. And I decided I would have 1/2 inch seams, so I planned for that. I cut it out. And the top of it, I wanted to put a fairly wide ruffle. So you see the top of it is about 10.5 inches long. So the piece for the ruffle, I needed to cut at least twice as big. So here's the length of the ruffle. It's almost 22 inches by about 4 inches. So if I do the seams, I would end up with a 3-inch ruffle. So that's the end of the ruffle piece. And then I also wanted a small ruffle around the outside. So I tried to show this with a tape measure, and I needed the ruffle to be twice as long. So however long this ended up being, it's hard to do that and take a picture at the same time. I cut this really long piece, and it was twice as long as that U-shaped edge. And then I folded one edge, as you can see, twice with pins and pressed it down and sewed it. I also, what you do is you fold in the corner first, and then you fold in the two sides twice. I pressed it, I sewed it, which you can see on the lower edge here, but then I needed to make a ruffle out of it. And if you've never done this before, what you need to do is sew 2 lines where you want it to be ruffled. And the first one is about 1/8 of an inch in, and the second one is about 1/4 of an inch from that. And you do it on the widest, what's called the basting size on your sewing machine, and you can use the same thread. Some people use a different color thread, but I just use the same color thread. And the reason you need 2, as you can see at the top of that edge, is because if you only use one, you can end up ripping the thread, and then you have to start all over again. So you want 2, and after you do that, this is the thing that took the very, very longest of making this costume, making the ruffle. And what you could do is put a pin in the halfway point and then pull the threads to make it ruffle from each edge. And the thing is, it's going to take some trial and error, because after you finish, you need to pin it, as I've done here, to the cape. And that takes some doing too, because you might not have it exactly the number of inches you need it to be, and then you have to start over and get the ruffle just right. And you can see I pinned the ruffle out of the way, and then I sewed it at a 1/2 inch seam. Then I turned it over, and after I sewed it, I wanted to stitch it down one more time to get it really flat. So this is the right side of the fabric with it pinned down, and this is the underside with it pinned down. So see, I want to sew that seam down and get it really flat, but I decided to sew it from the top, and after I sewed it, it looked like this. So it gets it nice and flat and keeps that seam edge flat. So now it was time to add the bigger ruffle to the top. Oh, nope, not yet. This is when I put the rickrack on. I bought green rickrack to go along with the green color of hair on the witch's hat. And I just used some green thread. I didn't have matchings, but it's for a dog and I didn't really care. So I sewed that on. Now it's time to do the ruffle. So I did the same thing. I finished the edge and the 2 ends, and folding them under twice, 1/4 inch each, so I had a 1/2 inch. And I probably pressed it with the pinning before I sewed it just to make it lay flat. There it is on the underside. And then afterward, I did the same basting stitch to this one on the unfinished edge. I did two stitches of the basting stitch, one 1/8 of an inch from the edge and one about 1/4 inch from there, and then I pulled them until they were the same size as this whole top pieces. And this one was easier to do than that whole long U-shaped edge around the cape. So now I have it pinned down and ready to sew. And after I sewed it, you can see the scissors here. I'm trimming some of that off. It was just, this fabric that I bought was just really stringy. Then I flipped it down and pinned it down because I'm going to sew that edge down so that it stays. Here's the underside while it's pinned. There's another one. And then I guess this is another one. It's just better with the flash right before I stitch it down. One more. And then I sewed it down. Okay, so now I need to create some little flaps because I need to put some Velcro things to keep it on the dog. So I cut a couple pieces that were 4 inches wide by about 10 inches long. And what I'm going to do for each of these 2 straps is sew them around the left and top edges, but I'm going to leave an opening at the top so you can see where there are no pins. That's where I stopped both times. Okay, see, and here's after I sewed them, so the top part is actually open so I can flip it inside out, and then I trimmed the corners of the top one already, and I still have to trim, and I trimmed the edges at the ends. So now I flip them inside out. I use this tool, you could just use the end of a pen, the part that doesn't write, to poke out the corners to get them nice and pokey. And then after they were all turned out, I pinned them down and stitched them on the machine. And then after they were stitched, you'll see I stitched them onto the cape on the left side. That's where you see that. And now I'm sewing some black Velcro, the soft part, right to it. And I don't care that the stitching shows through. It's black thread on black fabric. And then you can see on the left side of the other strap, I have the plasticky part of the Velcro. Now at the top, near where the dog's neck would be, I made some little ones, some little flaps. And what I did then, I held it on the dog and I decided where I would just need small pieces of Velcro. So I held it there and then put a couple pins in so I could Velcro it. Now when I got done, I decided I wanted to glue on some gems with some fabric glue, embellishment glue, and I also wanted to play with some purple and some silver fabric glue. And I guess it's called fabric paint. There's glue in it, so I wanted to practice first. My silver glue I'd had for a while and I liked it better because the little spout was smaller. The purple one had a bigger spout, so I had to practice. The silver one that you see on the lower right of the practice fabric, it's actually a combination of glue and glitter, so after the glue dries, that whitish goes away. So make sure you practice first to make sure you know how much to put on and what you want to do. This is a picture of the cape right after I glued on the embellishments and used the fabric paint. So you can see it hasn't dried yet. You can still see glue. I put it on top of my X-Acto healing mat, which is a good thing to do because some of that glue will go right through the fabric. So I let it dry, and then here's a picture of the dog with the hat on and the cape, and here's a picture of her with the little cape, with the little ruffles. It's so cute on her. I also stuffed the hat with some tissue paper so that it sits on her, but I think it turned out so cute.